Cultivated Marketer, episode 51. From the front line up. Why safety communications is the most human work in communications and marketing. What if the most important communications work happening right now isn't happening in boardrooms or with brand campaigns, but it's on job sites, refineries, and construction projects, where the wrong message at the wrong time can cost someone their life or their livelihood. So we've had a lot of conversation the past several months around things that were maybe more general in nature. I'm going to go back to even our conversation with Colleen Powell. Feels like we were doing a lot of brand, a lot of research-based things that were more general and broad in nature. And then the last couple months, we've niched down to a couple things with Colleen Powell's interview. Now we're talking a lot about safety comms and frontline workers.
Safety comms, totally different than branding and marketing.
Yeah, very different. And I think the one thing that strikes me is a lot of times we talk about how distracted folks could be. Even you and I were just kind of joking about that. We're trying to hold a podcast interview and we've got family members like trying to distract us. And no, I'm recording. Leave me alone. Could you imagine trying to run a forklift while you've got a child trying poking you on the shoulder, right? That was the thing that struck me is other industries, other job functions, we talk about people just needing to focus and lock in on their job. But when it comes to folks in a construction environment, that is even more paramount.
Yes.
And the whole notion of really having limited time to get messaging to them was a big takeaway from this conversation for me.
Yeah, I love this whole conversation about safety communications because it was not something that I expected to really tie into so many other areas of communications that I try and teach to nonprofit communicators. But oh my word, I mean, there's just so many parallels. You've seen my page of notes that I took. The one key thing that I think anyone should pay attention to is this idea that she talks about using communication to build influence. I thought that was so key. I'm not going to give it away because I want people to listen, but it was an incredible interview. I think that safety communications is very niche or niche, depending on however you want to use that word. You could be working in medical internal communications, or you could be working at a nonprofit, or you could be doing corporate communications for some big corporate behemoth. And this interview is going to apply. There's so many things that she talks about that will help you do your job better and grow as a leader, as a communicator, and grow as an influencer as a communicator. You know, I thought it was so good.
The point you hit on, if they're hearing this as a preamble before we get into the interview, is don't listen to this and say, oh, this is just a safety communications interview. This is a career and professional development interview around someone who pivoted their career, went into healthcare, has done a lot of safety communications for construction, architecture, and engineering firms, right? But there's so many takeaways, no matter your industry. And the whole notion of influence ran throughout the entire thing too, particularly when we're talking about the best things that people can do for their careers, thinking about the influence and being visible. That was such a tremendous takeaway that you have to reinforce for not just certain generations, as we were discussing in the interview, but certain people. Like I'm even prone to that. It's like, I'd rather dig into some spreadsheets sometimes. Really probably should go to that coffee meetup as opposed to maybe dig into the spreadsheet. So Shea was great. Shea was great in that regard. So anything else that you could think of that folks need to hear from her? We just need to launch into the chat with her.
Yes, I think we just need to dive in. It was so good.
Yes. Kind of like I told my neighbor the other day. He said, is it this or that? And I go, yes. Yes, both can be true. We're just going to launch into this conversation with Shea Sullivan. Everyone enjoy. Welcome to Cultivated Marketer, where we talk marketing professional development so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen.
I'm Matt Tidwell.
And I'm Julie Masson.
And our guest today, we're going to talk some safety comms today. Our guest is the CEO and founder of Comms at Work, an internal communications consultancy that helps organizations connect with their workforces in creative, data-driven ways that elevate performance, manage change and risk, and foster the kind of safety cultures that actually stick. She describes herself as a proud TV news quitter. We've had a couple quitters on the show of late. We love a good pivoter. I'll pull the Friends approach and the euphemism, a couple pivoters here. And she brings 28 years of corporate communications and media experience, including 11 years with engineering and construction giant Bechtel, where she managed communications for major capital projects like the Washington, D.C. Metro Silver Line and the largest refinery expansion in the U.S. in over 30 years, people. A 23-year member of IABC, she is a certified strategic communication management professional, past president of IABC Houston, and truly an advocate for the people doing the hardest work. Shea Sullivan, welcome to the show.
Well, that's quite the intro. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Honored to have you. Yes.
Yes, we're so glad you're here, Shea. I also really, truly love that description of you as a TV news quitter. And I want us to talk more about that. Like, why did you leave? What led you to do that? But before we do that, I want you to talk to us about how you got started in journalism. What drew you to that field? And just give us the background on that, because I love to hear how people got where they are now, but especially where they got to their very first marketing communications role. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. Growing up, I was always really into drama and theater and debate and, those types of communication. And then when I was in high school, I was just obsessed with MTV. I mean, weren't we all? And I thought MTV VJ was going to be a great career for me. But ultimately, I was also really into like ESPN and sports. And I come from a pretty sporty family. And so we were always involved in these kinds of things. I'm just a huge fan of sports and thought that maybe that was the road I should be going. ESPN was early days and thought, I could go be the sideline reporter for the Astros or, some things like that. I thought that would be something really fun to do because I loved sports so much. Wouldn't it be so much fun to cover it? In college, all of my internships were in sports journalism. I went to University of Texas in Austin. So there's a lot of material there to cover. I interned at the NBC affiliate there for 3 years and wrote for the Daily Texan, and I was on the sports staff. The summer between my junior and senior year, I got an internship at CNN Sports in Atlanta, and that was the summer of the Olympics. And that was something I'd really put my sights on, like, I want to go do this. And I got it, which was really crazy because people forget that CNN had a sports department back in the day.
And I did. I'd forgot until just now.
Yeah. So we worked on the Sports Tonight show, which was like the competitor to SportsCenter on ESPN. And we didn't get to cover the Olympics per se because NBC had all the rights to that, but we were still around it. And it was really something cool to do. But what I found is that when I got out of school and you're actually working at smaller TV stations, that it's not all it's cracked up to be. And my internships were a heck of a lot more fun than real life. So I did it for 3 years and you're shooting your own stuff. You don't live where you want to live. You're making no money, none. I mean, it was just kind of embarrassing and I'm not really suited for poverty, but making $15,500 a year. And I'm like, wow, I went to college and I still have to ask my grandma for money because I can't pay my bills. And I was burned out. I got burned out really, really fast and just decided that there's something else I can do with my journalism degree. I just don't know what it is yet. And so I called my parents and said, come get me, and I'm going to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And actually got into corporate communications first. I anchored an ad in the paper. I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where my parents live, and got a job at Blue Cross Blue Shield downtown in what we called back then the advertising and marketing department, because they didn't really call it corporate communications back then, but we did everything from TV ads and, I would work on scripts and things like that. But then we also did internal communications too. So we had like our employee newsletter and, some of those types of things. It wasn't as multimedia as it is now. This was about 2000 when I made the switch. And I thought, I'll give this a shot. And if I really miss TV, I can always go back. But I didn't miss it at all.
And now you're a TV news quitter. I like that.
The TV news quitter. Yes. Shea, they've heard on a past episode that I quit TV and broadcaster. The podcast brings this to me, right? But I had the same talk with a professor. You're going to earn $13,000, work in some podunk town. I love some podunk towns. I'm just moving to a podunk town. But I needed more. In an extreme makeover, I had a face for radio too. So, it's one of those things where...
I'm glad you said that. It was right on the tip of my tongue.
It's okay. I got called on the carpet for forgetting to wear lipstick one time. So, it's not a forgiving business.
No, especially for females.
Yeah, one of my daughter's favorite movies and one of mine is Broadcast News. You just have to watch that a couple times to tell you what that life is going to be like.
We used to sit around and watch that in college. This is the greatest. And we're like, damn, this is accurate.
Way too close to home. You just mentioned moving to Blue Cross Blue Shield kind of after those experiences. I mean, moving from broadcast journalism into corporate communications is one leap, right? But it's at least adjacent. But moving into something like healthcare and now energy and construction, those are very specific industries with one could view being constraints. You think about compliance, you think about things that we're going to talk a great deal about, safety and risk. How did you find your way there? And when you got into healthcare and thinking in the world of construction or architecture and engineering, what are the things that maybe surprised you most as you started to get into those industries?
I think what I've learned all along is I don't feel like communications is industry specific. I think if you get in there and you make a conscious effort to learn the business, then you're going to be successful at what you do. And so to me, I never thought twice about changing over industries or anything like that. What drew me to energy and construction was I grew up in it, actually. So I'm from Corpus Christi originally. It's a big refinery town, and my dad worked for oil companies growing up. He was on the marketing side of things, so it was a bit different than being out in the field and actually doing operations. But so many people have ties to the energy industry that are generational. I mean, it's just kind of a way of life here, and we're really proud of it. So when I was first looking to move back to Houston, that was my target. I wanted to get back to Texas, and I'd been in Tulsa for about 8 years. I can't do the ice storms, y'all. I needed some warmer climes and better Mexican food. So Houston it was. I just happened to apply for this job at Bechtel. I didn't know anything about the company. Started doing some research, like, wow, they do some really cool things. And they were building the first new refinery expansion in the US in 30 years. This was something big, big, big. But they needed some boots on the ground. They really wanted somebody that had knowledge of the industry. But what's kind of interesting too, though, is that a lot of people don't know about me is that my first major was actually architecture. And I also was trying to double major in engineering because I'm really a nerd. And a lot of people don't know that. And I was always good at math and science, which doesn't even compute with communications. They're like, how did you do this 180, right?
Those are usually different people.
Very.
You're usually not good at both.
Yeah, although the science of analytics and metrics and KPIs and OKRs tied to all that, there's definitely a place for science these days, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that kind of came full circle for me because I only did a year of that. After I failed physics, I'm like, I'm going to find a different major. And I thought my parents were going to kill me, but communications worked out. So that's kind of a full circle thing because I still get to nerd out on my projects now. So
yeah, that's awesome. You could take something that was a passion or even something, I don't know, growing up, if that was conversation. The oil industry was probably conversation around the dinner table growing up as well.
It was mostly, I would say, the ebbs and flows of the energy industry.
Yeah, a lot of those for sure.
Are we going to have a lean Christmas or not? I don't know. When the going's good, it's really good. But when it's bad, it's bad.
Shea, it's so great to see you again. I missed IBC WorldCon this year. I had so much FOMO, but I know several of my colleagues like you were there and had a great time. You represent a really rich tradition of terrific communicators from the Houston, Texas area. I'm thinking of my friends Alice Brink and John Harris and just some fantastic IBCers down there who are really kind of legends. And so we're so happy to have you on as well. And thanks for all your support, by the way, of IBC down through the years. Certainly near and dear to my heart. Let's keep talking about your career trajectory a little bit, because you spent 11 years at Bechtel managing communications for some really massive projects, capital projects, things like that. What did working at kind of that huge scale teach you about communications that you really couldn't have learned anywhere else, do you think?
They do big things at that company. It's go big or go home, really. What I learned, and I didn't spend all 11 in communications. I did move over to proposals for a little while. So I got kind of the business development side of things as well. But in comms, it was just trying to adjust to the sheer scale of how big things actually were. And then having to sort of dissect and figure out, okay, what does everybody need to know here? Who are my stakeholders? Is the community involved? When you're on project, you have to do pretty much a whole lot of everything. You're not going to have internal comms. You're doing public affairs. You're writing traffic reports. You're doing all kinds of things that construction touches. And again, you get to nerd out a little bit, but I would say it's sort of organized chaos because there's always something going on, but it's very well planned. And so if you can integrate yourself into understanding a construction schedule, then you can start planning your communications for what needs to happen. And so that's one of the things that I learned. It took me a couple of years to really figure that out. It really was different going from health insurance to the oil and gas on the producer side of things to be on the construction side of things. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but.
How did you find construction supervisors, construction engineers as internal clients? I always like to ask that question when people are in vertical industries.
Yeah, you need to pay more attention to them because they know what they're doing. They're the ones that are actually out there doing the work. So one size fits all stuff coming from the corporate office, it's not going to stick.
Yeah, it's interesting too when you talked about the planning and scheduling and having to know a construction schedule to get in there. And then the question that Matt just asked around working with construction and the frontline workers in a safety environment. A lot of folks, they may have been on those work sites once or twice in their life, right? Per happenstance or walking through a city and see that going on. And most people think of safety comms as signage, you know, if they've been in the industry a little bit, training and certifications and toolbox talks, if they know anything about OSHA at all. But your work goes much deeper than that. I know even just thinking about the challenges of what types of tools are even allowed on a site, because I visited Princess Paisley Park one time and they take your cell phone from you and make you put it in a bag. And that's almost what a worksite environment's like, because it's a distraction. How would you define safety communications and why does it matter more than people kind of realize?
I feel like there's a shift. You mentioned compliance and signage and things like that. And toolbox talks still are one of the most effective ways to get news to frontline people. What you're talking about there is compliance. You're just distributing materials for compliance. You're putting up posters. I call it the bare minimum now because you're just like, hey, we checked the box. We sent this out. They did their job safety analysis. They did their pre-work check cards. You're checking the boxes, which it's part of their standard practice to try to minimize workplace hazards before you start work, you know, pre-task analysis and things like that. But what we can do a better job of is communicating for influence. And what we're trying to do there is we're really trying to promote safe work behaviors. And behaviors are human, right? There's human performance factors. That's a whole nother thing you could talk about. But a lot of people can't wrap their brain around in the industry, but it's a new thing. It's happening. And another problem that they have is that we've got infinite content for people with finite attention. And what I mean by the fact they have finite attention is because it's not because anyone is dumb or can't multitask. It's because they have very specific tasks in front of them. You have tasks or job or you're running a unit. That is your number one focus, is doing that thing all right the whole time and getting home in one piece, right? So when we throw a whole bunch of stuff at them, it's just noise. They need to focus on the job that's in front of them. And so what's most important to them? What are we asking them to do or how to think or how to act? And so that's why I'm suggesting we've got to reframe this. We have to reframe our communications approach from compliance to influence. And I think the old ways of doing things was exactly that. It's like, we sent this out, we put these posters up, they didn't see that. Well, it's like, okay, your poster's 2 years old. You didn't make it compelling. It's got 80 words on it. No one's going to read that.
They become blind to it over time. It's just another thing on a site, right?
Yeah, I call it lipstick on a pig. Yeah, or just faded words on a poster, right? When you're communicating for influence in frontline environments, I feel like your people actually understand, they have input, they talk about it, they're part of the process. And ultimately, that's where you see results, is when you've got people talking about it and they are, you know, very much part of the conversation and part of the solution. When we empower people at every level, that's how you build a safety culture. And then you reinforce and you recognize and you show people that the work they're doing is valued and appreciated.
That really is good. Thanks, Shea. And, you know, this relates to me because as a young communicator, I can distinctly remember, I think it was a big hospital I was working for. But anyway, I was out on the construction site and I was the comms guy that had forgotten to put on the hard hat and also had the wrong shoes on.
Oh, no.
And so all of a sudden, these three burly construction guys start to walk up. They look like they have twisted me in a pretzel. I'm like, why do they look so mean? I think it points up to the sign and says, you know, 183 days since an injury. He's like, if you're the cause, and it was at that point, these guys are serious. I think, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that safety culture thing. Obviously, kind of a funny story there, but it's certainly a very, very serious subject. You know, you've talked about that poor communications is among the top reasons why projects fail and why people get hurt. That's certainly a powerful statement. Walk us through what that looks like in practice. I know we've all been to the construction sites where they really do have the posters up that say, you know, 0 injuries and 130. That's probably really powerful. But are there other things that are happening in that space as well to kind of promote that safety culture?
Yeah, I've also recently gotten involved with American Society of Safety Professionals, and there's a big conference here, and I go to their meetings too. The cool thing is that we're all talking about the same things. We just have different approaches to it in practice because I'm coming from communications. These other people are subject matter experts in occupational safety or industrial hygiene or mechanical. There's so many things, right? But everybody wants the same thing. And the industry is recognizing that communication has a lot to do with it. But it's not just posters, but they need help with it, right? And some people are really good at it. I mentioned that when people are empowered at every level, that culture means you're not just barking down from the top. If you're involving the people that are actually doing the work, then they're going to feel a bit more invested in it as well. And they feel cared for, and they also care for each other. I mean, a lot of people that work in frontline environments, a lot of them are related. They've worked together for 10, 20 years on a crew or in a unit. What I'd like to see more of too is how are we training supervision to become better communicators? Because two things. Number one is the frontline manager or supervisor is still the single most trusted source.
Yeah, we see that all the time.
Every audit I've done back that up. All the research out there backs that up. So why are we leaving them out of communications planning? Another thing too is that, for example, in construction, you get promoted to say you're a supervisor. You're promoted because you're very good at your craft. You know how to do this job. Are we helping them be better communicators? They're now leaders of people. These are supervisory skills that they're in this trusted position now, but I don't feel like we're developing them enough. And a lot of companies are coming around to that. And part of their supervisor training does involve some communication, but there's still a lot of compliance things that go along with it too.
Yeah. The other thing about the supervisory relationship too is there used to be functions and roles within organizations where the supervisor was left to just supervise.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you want to be a supervisor or a manager, you're a working manager, you're a working director. So you've got your own book of business of whatever that job is, and you're left to supervise people, which really doesn't help with the communication because that ends up becoming like a tertiary responsibility. So it's tough.
Okay, I always find a way, and it's always very easy, but I always find a way to connect what we're talking about with our guests to nonprofit communications because that's what I do. And I did not think that safety communications would tie so well, but let me tell you, it has. I'm always helping people I work with, nonprofit communications leaders, helping them build their influence within their nonprofit. And the reality is there's so many similarities between these frontline workers. And if you cannot get someone's attention who's already overwhelmed and overworked and has a short attention capacity, it's going to be challenging. So I took vigorous notes I'm going to be sharing with my nonprofit communications leaders. But I want to talk more about these frontline workers. Sometimes I've heard them called deskless workers. I don't know if you know who Joanna Parsons is. She's kind of the internal comms girl. She shared a story about, I believe it was the Irish police force, where she was responsible for internal communications. And she just felt like things weren't landing. And so I think she went to the place where they gathered before they went out on their shifts. And she just watched how they were taking in information. And it totally shifted how she communicated with them. So talk to us about what the tactics look like. I'm not saying get super specific, like do a PDF for this. We don't have to be that finite, but as you said, they've got finite time. So they're busy, they're skeptical. I think we hear that a lot too. You know, they can be like, oh, corporate. They might not trust something that comes from corporate because it feels too distant from them and their supervisor. So how do you create communications and communicate with influence in that kind of an environment?
When you're first planning, I advise my clients and teams, go where their eyes and ears and feet are. It's that simple. Like you mentioned, the police force, go to the daily briefing where they get together and they talk about stuff. The toolbox talk we mentioned, still very effective. Does the site have digital signage capacity? If it doesn't, what do you have? Break room flyers. I've even put flyers on the back of Porta-John doors. I mean, I've got you for 10 seconds there, right?
Or more.
Or more. Just don't put anyone's face in there like that.
Yeah, that probably won't go over well.
No. But another thing too is to design communications that are relatable. And so you're still going to do signage. You're still going to do visuals to have sort of an experience marketing in the field about safety communications too. But people will relate when they see their buddies in campaigns. So it's kind of like seeing your friends in the paper. And that's a way to celebrate people on the job site. Like, hey, here's someone who did something really well and they upheld this core value. And then let's show that person. It actually kind of feeds off a good energy when they start to see good things happening around with their people and you're rewarded and showing people that they are valued for the work that they're doing. It takes a while to build it, I would say, but once it starts, it kind of snowballs and they're talking to each other and also giving them the tools that they need to communicate certain things. Like, can I help out with the toolbox talk? One of the things that came up at the safety conference that I spoke at in the spring was I asked everyone in the room, how many of you in here are communications professionals? None. They're all safety people. Okay. But I said, who's responsible for safety communications? 3/4 of the room raises their hand. Why are you responsible for communications when what you're really responsible for is a safe job site, reporting, compliance, all the things that actually go along with the disciplines of safety and industrial hygiene, right? So why are you having to do comms? And how can we bridge that gap? So I gave them some practical tools, just understanding that a lot of companies may not have communications or marketing professionals that can actually help in the field. So I gave them some toolkits on here's some easy things that you can do to make this faster, better. I mean, keep it simple. Stop putting words everywhere. No one reads this. If I need you to do one thing, can I walk past it on my way to badge in that day and understand in that 4 seconds that I have you that I need to do something, or I learned that today, or hey, it's time for benefits, or whatever it is that message has to be. Strip it down and make it so simple. Don't create the noise. Actually cut through it, right? As we like to say.
You used a term in there around bridging. So we're going to bridge discussion because we've been talking a lot about the field. But earlier, you also talked about this notion of the role of comms being a strategic entity. I know this is a topic Julie always loves to get into, the mind of the CCO here. And a lot of communicators still struggle to get that seat at the table in these operational environments, particularly construction, architecture, engineering. How have you made the case that comms should be a strategic business partner to the leaders who think of it maybe more as of just implementation of a safety environment, right? And not think of it in a strategic capacity?
It takes time. I'm not going to lie. My first job sites, they just wanted me to do a newsletter. And I'm like, is that really what I got hired to do? There's so much going on out here. But you've got to build relationships. This is a relationship-driven business. And go sit in someone's office. You've got to be there at 6 a.m. when they're there. You have to show up. This is an in-person, get the job done kind of thing. Remote is not going to build trust in this organization. And you have to be where they are and just see what they're doing and listen a lot and get that corporate mindset out because it does not compute. Go talk to people. I mean, get out in the field, go attend a toolbox talk, go say, hey, we're going to do a video or whatever. You have to be where they are in operations environments in terms of like trying to get more decision makers to see you as a strategic partner. Ask them questions. Like one of the things I'd like to do about safety is they're really into data, right? They have data at their disposal. But the thing is like if you're looking at what leading and lagging indicators are, you can come to me and say, oh, we need to do a hand safety campaign. And we've all done the hand safety campaigns. I hate hand safety campaigns. Anyway, and I said, well, why? Are you having some lagging indicators that are showing your safety data is indicating this, right?
Yeah, that's a problem.
Right. Or what can we look at where we can do some preventive type, more creative things out of the field instead of just being reactionary to what the data has already happened? Can we get ahead of it so that way your trend never goes up, right? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I heard two things out of that. I think one is it goes back to the discussion we were having around where you may be personally really well affixed for this is the science of the KPI and the OKR and being able to sit down with an executive and say, these are the things that matter to you, right? And then the second part of that is asking questions and listening for you to help figure out how comms can solve those problems. That's perfect in the sense of how to then be able to move and get to that behavior change you said was so important.
There are people who will still challenge that communications does not have a direct correlation to safety data. And I will challenge that. I will challenge that because when communication is absent, like without it, you're going to have problems. Can I say that unless I am specifically asking that this one piece of information or this one thing that we did directly tied to a behavior that was safer, okay, yeah, I can solve for that. I'm not going to ask you about everything I put out there.
Yeah, just based on the limited bandwidth we have with the folks you mentioned earlier, too, it's not like you have some sort of causal relationship of don't touch the cheese and then you watch them touch the cheese, right? It's like, it's not that simple. Sorry. I wish it were.
I know.
Yeah. Listen, my favorite thing to say when I left one of my jobs, the previous chief of staff, I heard through the grapevine that he carried this phrase throughout. So I thought, yes, it's stuck. But communications is a strategic function of an organization. It's not a support department.
Exactly. Or cost center.
Yes, yes. And it's not that we don't support other areas of an organization, but if you just treat communications like a support function or a service department or a print shop, you're really not going to be getting the full ROI you could be getting out of communication. So I resonate with this a lot. But let me move us on. A little birdie told me that you have guided clients through mergers. I know our friend Lynn Zimmerman, she's done a lot of those.
She's done more than I have.
Well, when I hear this, I'm very impressed. You've done mergers, digital implementations. Where does internal communications most often break down during those moments? Because that's a very unique type of communication process.
When we are not involved in planning discussions or decisions, and if you're still treated like, okay, all this planning has been done, or we can't talk about this because it's hush hush, and then here, you need to get this out, and they kick it over the table. It's like, we're already in a losing position. If you're not involved when the discussions are happening, think about how many times, if you're ever in that position, we're able to question some things, or like, hey, did you think about this group of people? Or what about this language? Or what about this? There's so many what ifs that we bring that someone who's just strictly focused on the business, they might have the blinders on for the change communication or the digital transformation or the merger, or we can't talk about it because we can't leak it out. Well, you think I'm going to leak it? Like, do you think it's my job to go to the press? That's stupid.
Makes sense for sure. The struggle is real, definitely. Hey, the focus of our show, professional development. Just always curious to ask guests, Shea, what advice do you give to communications professionals, maybe early in their career, who want to follow sort of the path that you've taken, but maybe doesn't know quite how to get there? What are the things that you emphasize to them? What should they be thinking about at that early stage?
The value of networking is unparalleled, and I cannot tell younger people enough. You need to get out there. You've got to be visible, because you can get frustrated all you want with all this. I sent out 100 resumes and no one's even called me. So is everyone else, right? The game's changed. I've only gotten a couple of jobs in my career that were not directly involved to connections I know in IABC or in the industry or whoever. It's because of people I know, and they know the work that I can do. If they just looked at my resume, it just goes into the ether. I can understand how it's easy to get discouraged in today's environment. But if you're visible, then people will think of you and step in, volunteer, and do some things. Go to the chapter meetings, go to mixers. If you don't live in a city that has all these things, book virtual, get aggressive on LinkedIn. Because again, I've rarely reached out to somebody that said, no, I don't want to connect with you. Okay. Most people are open to connection. If you come at it with a purpose and say, hey, I'm looking to expand my network. I'm a junior communications person. Who in this business will say no if you're not selling me anything, right?
In particular, earlier in your career, I've had a lot of conversation with folks where I'm like, you have a superpower that you're not going to have when you reach our collective status. You have a superpower where people generally want to help mentor in that regard. So use that superpower while you've got it.
Absolutely. And then also, don't be afraid to start off as a generalist and just learn a whole lot about everything and then figure out how you want to niche. You're not going to be an influencer or whatever. Maybe that comes later. And then learn the business. That's the thing. Just get in there and just learn. You're not going to be the boss. You're not going to make 80 grand coming out of school. Like, just stop.
I really loved your first point about networking. Talk about an example of somebody who's really walked the walk there. I mean, IABC, our favorite organization, has been a common thread really throughout your entire career, and it's obviously helped you get to where you are. And as we've said so many times on the show, it's just ironic that now is a time when young professionals really ought to be availing themselves of those kinds of resources more than ever, and yet our memberships are kind of at some of their lowest points. So it's just ironic that we're in this weird situation. You would think.
I've talked to some people here in Houston from other organizations, from PRSA and AMA, like our sister organizations. We all work together on stuff. There's a general feeling that the younger people aren't joiners. And I don't know if you see that in school, Matt, but maybe there's a line between work and life balance. I will say their ability to set boundaries is something that I have never been able to do. And I appreciate that in the younger people. But at some point, you still have to do this on your own time and invest in your career. That delineation and communications. I mean, maybe if you want to go into construction, sure, you can go punch that clock and you're there for 10-hour days and you're done. Okay. And then you can go home and divorce it, right? But I think in communications, if you're not networking, you're just out there twisting in the wind.
Yeah, I think some of it's work life. And then we're all just at the plethora of professional development that's available to all of us on demand, right? That we didn't have when we first came out of school. You sort of had to join an IBC or a PR. That was really your only way. And so I think there's a lot of factors, right? But as I said, the struggle is real. And hopefully younger folks will realize the importance and start coming back. That's super important.
All right. So we've gotten deep in some questions. We've gotten deep in safety talk and being strategic and then getting out in the field. Now, this is where we're quick. We're going to change speed, change directions. It's a good sports metaphor as a former sports broadcast journalism person there. So we're going to ask you 4 quick questions. Each of us have at least one. And then if you don't like what we ask you, you can pivot and give us an answer that you like. So, because you might not like the first one I'm going to ask you, because spent a lot of time in Space City of late. Which H term is Houston most known for? Heat, healthcare, or highways, or the Shea fill in the blank H term?
Well, I walked out, grabbed some lunch before this, and humidity.
Oh, humidity. Okay. Fair. The option D.
And hopefully it's not hurricanes either.
You guys have H cornered, I think.
What's one word every internal communicator should lead with?
Why?
Ooh, I like it.
Don't do things just because you want to do them. There has to be a why behind it.
Yeah, big time. Amen.
Love it.
Hey, what's the one communication skill every marketer should borrow from safety communications?
Ooh, I love this question.
This is a tough one. I think in marketing, I go to data again on all this. I think there's a lot of transferable things there. And these are all data-driven organizations. How do you interpret that data and turn it into a story? That's how we're going to continue to build culture and make things relatable and human in a increasingly AI non-human world. And there's people behind every decision, people behind every thing that happens on a job site. So don't ever lose that human factor, but still let the data lead you to kind of figure out how you could do this better.
Okay, last question. What is your comms fuel? Is it coffee? Is it an internal comms audit? Or is it a well-organized job site?
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm one of the few people in the world that doesn't like coffee.
I don't either. We can be friends.
I like tea. I don't like coffee.
Same. Okay.
I love a good comms audit. Oh, let me tell you, doing those interviews and data dives and looking at material, that's fun. I'm working on a process audit right now for a client. And I told some of them this when I was reporting out. I said, look, you go in thinking you're solving for X, but what you really come out of it is X plus Y to the Z power divided by 3. I mean, it's like, it ends up being way, way more than you think it is, but it's valuable stuff. So I love those. I mean, well-organized job site, that's great, but that's not my job.
Man, if we were in the same city, I would be saying we're going to go hang out because we need to hang out.
Oh, we totally would. We totally would.
Comms audits, my cup of tea, to be punny.
Yes. I think I'm coming to Kansas City in the fall because the Longhorns are playing at Mizzou, and I usually fly into Kansas City for that. So maybe I just need to come see y'all.
Well, hey, to tease a little something, and we can't say much, but we are planning a little potential in-person thing. So if it happens to fall in the time when you are in town, then yes, you're going to need to come. Then you can see all of us.
That would be awesome.
It is never that I look at a Missouri football schedule, but I might do that. I might do that for this. So, you know what? I will look at the Texas Longhorn schedule. My daughter was almost a Texas Longhorn, so I'll look at that schedule. Anything else that you'd like to mention that we may have missed? I know we're so limited in our capacity to ask good questions sometimes that anything else that you'd like to mention that we may have missed?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff. You know, we can talk about frontline and safety comms all day. I mean, I just did a 3-day conference about it. The cool thing is that companies are starting to pay more attention to it. And I hope it's not because they have to, but it's because they want to. That recognize the value of their internal employees. And it's hard. I mean, you look at turnover, you look at safety, you look at quality, you look at manufacturing. There's so many factors that are still people driven. And I think ultimately people want to do a good job where they are and they just want to be happy and safe. And so how do we help them get there? And that sounds cheesy, but it's true.
Behavior. Like you said, that influence piece. And speaking of behavior, Shea, you have been phenomenal. So gracious with your time today. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks to all of you. Again, just an honor to be on the podcast. And I can't wait to hear it and then meet you all in person.
You bet. Thanks, Shea.
Yeah, we would love that. So everybody can learn more about Shea and Comms at Work at commsatwork.biz. We will have that and more in the show notes. If you found value in today's episode, check us out on our website, CultivatedMarketer.com. You'll also be able to subscribe to us, rate us, and leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Remember, a garden of opportunity grows with Cultivated Marketer.